Today's viewer's email has come in from Craig, the subject of which was, "What's wrong with Thailand?" I should also mention that there are some opinions shared in this email that are in no way reflective of my own, so please bear that in mind. So, let's get into it. Hi John. First things first, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for the video you put out recently about the Thai girl gorging on steak. The whole video, or should I say the whole story that came in from that person, if I recall correctly, he was called Ben, is a pretty similar replication of my own experiences in Thailand. I too had heard lots of fantastic stories about how the country was the best place in the world, how it was a playground for people from the West who could do things they had no chance of doing in their own countries. Sadly, when I arrived and experienced Thailand, this was far, far from the truth. I want to share my story, which is a bit reflective of that of Ben's, but I got a little deeper in the country. I got more involved, getting into a relationship with a Thai girl who just so happened to work in a bar. But I saw through her lies, deception, and world-ending greed before it was too late, and I escaped relatively unharmed. I hope you share my story, as it is also slightly negative towards Thailand, but my experiences are my own. And even after reading through the comments on that video I mentioned at the start of this email, half of which seemed to agree with Ben, the other half which seemed to call him the worst person in the world, I'm comfortable to share my story as a warning to people who might consider Thailand. Some things are great, but some things simply are not. So, as you say, John, let's get into it. I too had heard that Thailand was meant to be a very affordable or even downright cheap place to visit and live. And while this rings true to a certain extent if you're prepared to lower your standard of life, it is not true if you want a similar existence to that at home. I've seen videos you've made on your other channel where you talk about people's misconception when it comes to the affordability of Thailand, and I agree with you 100%. When I got to Thailand, like many single men, I wanted to look at the nightlife. I was expecting to be treated with a lot more respect than was shown by the people who work in the bars. It was as though I was a walking, talking ATM. There to give money and to be treated as a means to an end. This is not anything like how anyone is treated when you visit places like this. It was my understanding that when you're in Thailand, you will be treated as a provider, and I want to be careful which words I use here because I don't want to come across as snobbish, but I expected to be looked up on as opposed to being looked down upon. I don't really want to go deep into my backstory, but when I arrived in Thailand, I was already 58, newly retired, with a reasonable $2,500 a month income to live on, and the pot of savings that I could call upon if I ever wished to purchase anything substantial. This was around 2017, and while I had visited Thailand before a few times, it was with my ex-wife, who came from the same country as me, so I had no chance to check out any of the legendary nightlife, and we basically stayed in decent hotels, crashing by the pool, and going on pre-planned excursion. The basic tourist traps that everyone seems to do. But this wasn't the real Thailand, and I never experienced that until I actually arrived here, single, for the first time. Referring back to the email sent in by your other viewer, the way he describes Thailand as the land of greed couldn't be more accurate. I too was expecting the people to put me first, even above themselves. Perhaps it was an old-fashioned mindset that coming from the West, the part of the world that has given the most to the modern world, counted for at least a little bit of something, but I quickly lost this fairy tale vision the moment I arrived. Let's go back then to my first night, single, in Thailand, and I was pretty happy to be living what is many man's dream. My first experience, though, as I mentioned, was dreadful. I hated being looked up on as a walking ATM, so I didn't indulge on that night and instead went for a nice meal alone, then went to watch a sports game in one of the bars. The next few weeks went by and I was liking being in Thailand, but I was also hating being in Thailand because it didn't live up to my expectations whatsoever. The country itself was great. The nightlife itself was great, but the people seemed to want and expect things more than, in my opinion, they should have expected or wanted. I think your other viewer put it perfectly when he said he was expecting some of the people in Thailand to be happy with nothing sorts, and that's what I was expecting as well. The whole notion that I had built in my own mind over the past years before I moved here was that I was from the West. Don't want to give away my country, but obviously it's an English-speaking one, and therefore had some kind of expectation to be treated accordingly. I spent a few good months in Bangkok, living out of a hotel in downtown Bangkok, not quite yet ready to find a place to live. And it was around this time that I decided to go to the bars again. I'd avoided these for such a long time, even from my first night. I had not been back. But I reasoned with myself that this was one of the main reasons for going there, to enjoy the nightlife. So I headed to Soy Cowboy and sat in one of the bars, ordered a beer and started chatting to the nearest girl. She obviously got more keen as soon as I bought her a drink. I knew this was going to be expected, but how quickly she drank that drink upset me. She should have savoured that drink for a long time, perhaps me having 3 drinks to her having 1. But she was clearly the other way inclined. This was so off-putting. She should have been happy with 1. That was the thing that I didn't like. I knew what the average wage was in Thailand, and I didn't like the idea of these girls that worked in the bars earning a lot more than this. It was a kind of turn-off that I can't quite explain. Also, watching them playing on their latest phones was not to my liking. They were meant to be poor, not having the latest iPhone stashed in their bags. I quickly decided that I needed to accept this and move on. I wasn't going to get anywhere with this opinion, so I got stuck into the night and had a good time. I hadn't yet found a girl I liked enough to take with me, but I'm sure that would come at some point. I spent enough time staying in the hotel I was in, and I decided it was time to rent a place to live in. So I enlisted the help of a real estate agency to find me a condo around the $500 a month range. As someone still living in Bangkok to this day, the rents have gone through the roof recently, and while you can still find cheap places, they're going to be further away than you want them to be from the main areas. But I got my condo close to Asok. It was only a studio, but it was all I needed. By this time, I already had my retirement visa sorted out and felt like I was relatively settled in Thailand, and I didn't need to leave. I just needed to renew the visa every year. I got into a bit of a routine and accepted that the nightlife, while fun, something I wanted to do often, wasn't what I was expecting or hoping it to be. But I chalked this up to having preconceived opinions that I had held. It was around this time that I was in one of the bars on Soy Cowboy, one of the smaller ones somewhere down the middle. I don't want to name it, but when I walked in, I immediately noticed one of the girls. She stood out and was working behind the bar. She looked to be about 30 or thereabouts. I wanted to make sure I wasn't going for someone too young, as that was not going to end well, and my opinions, again, probably very, very wrong, were that someone 30 and above would be a lot more deferential and a lot more keen to behave appropriately due to her age. I got talking to this girl, and she firstly tried to pawn off another girl next to her to me. "She likes you," she said, but I wasn't interested in this other girl. Quickly, she realized this and started on a conversation with me as soon as I bought her a drink. The prices in there were insane, but in my mind, I just accepted it and should have been considering where we were. And going back to the original tale, the whole idea, at least in my opinion, was that the whole purpose behind the country of Thailand was to provide dirt cheap places for people like me to have a fantastic time. This wasn't the case. After a few more drinks, she all of a sudden leaned over the bar and kissed me, something I was not expecting. I'd not experienced this before, but I liked it. After a few more drinks, she said she wanted to go with me. We were both quite drunk, and I agreed, and off we went. I don't want to get into any detail here, but she did something that shocked me, in a good way, and right there and then I was hooked. I don't know what I was thinking. In all honesty, because I didn't want to get involved with the bar girl. I mean, I really didn't want to get involved with a bar girl, especially one who seemed keen on money, about her station in life. But for some reason, I kept going back and time again to her bar. When she wasn't there, I had all full thoughts of what she was doing, and when she was there, I was buying her drink after drink, and asking her to go with me at any given opportunity. I wasn't happy with the way I was doing things, but I just couldn't help it. I was falling for this girl, who turned out to be 28 by the way. A bit too young really, I should have known, but I kept going for it. I continued this routine probably 3 or 4 times a day for at least 2 months, and we were getting to know each other. I said I wanted her to move in with me and to be my girlfriend, and she said, as long as you pay me out of my job, around 7,000 baht, then I will be good to go with you. She said she liked me as well, and she would never do this for someone else. I know she was only telling me what I wanted to hear, but at the time I believed it, and she took all her stuff from the bar, she said she lived upstairs, and moved to my condo. It was quite a tight squeeze, as I only had a studio, and thought that we might need somewhere a bit bigger, at least a 1-bedroom, but we needed to see how things went first. I agreed to give her 20,000 baht a month, reasoning with myself that it was actually costing me more by visiting the bar and buying all the drinks. Part of me wasn't happy with what I was doing, but the other part of me was like a giddy early 20s person in love for the first time. Many of her habits I found were not something I was expecting. Things like leaving the door open when using the bathroom, eating on the floor, and as Ben said in his email to you, eating with her mouth wide open. The most awful smelling food I have ever had the mispleasure of smelling. Something called son tam pu pala. It's disgusting fermented fish dish, and when she opened the bag in the room, the place smelled for hours, and it was hard to get rid of. Then, the thought of kissing her after she ate this filth wasn't to my liking, but I put up with it and had a fantastic first few months with her. We'd go out to eat. She seemed to like going to fancy places and taking pictures and posting them online. I asked her if she made any money from this. She said no, and I said, what's the point? For show, she said. I like to show my friends where I go. So, here I am taking pictures of this Thai girl, half my age, eating in fancy restaurants on my dime while showing off. I found it hard to understand how she thought this was showing off, but in her mind it was. You probably know where this is going, that's why I'm writing in after all, but after about 3 months, all of a sudden, and out of the blue, she hit me with something pretty hard. She had a child that she was sending money to, and it was time for her to go and visit him. I never asked her about having a child before, but I assumed that that was something that you would bring up early on in the relationship. But to find out this way was quite harsh. Now, call me old-fashioned, but the idea of being with someone who already had a child filled me with a sense of disgust. Disgust like I'd never felt before. But what was I to do? I liked her. I would even go as far as saying I loved her. But her having a child and just thinking about the effects that caused on her physically made me sick, and things didn't feel the same after that. I wasn't quite yet ready to leave her, but I decided I probably would, when the time was right. I asked if I could go and visit her family with her as well, but she was adamant that this was not going to happen. We weren't married, she said, and this would not look good with her family. And here's me thinking, can you remember what you used to do for work? And that was okay with everyone. But it's not okay for the person supporting you financially to go and see your family. I never said that to her, but that's what I felt. I actually had a good few weeks when she was away, And she was away because she video called me often and showed me around the place. Part of me thought that she was actually going to go and meet some other guy, an even bigger idiot who sent her money when he wasn't even there. But I'm pretty sure that she was where she said she was. At least if she wasn't, she was doing a fantastic job of somehow showing it on the video calls. I got back into the swing of heading out in the evenings, going to the bars, and 50% of me was so angry and so pissed off that it wasn't as good as it should have been, wasn't as cheap as it should have been, and people weren't as deferential as they should have been. But 50% of me absolutely loved everything about it. I was in a mixed mind and really didn't know what to make of it all. Here I was, having a good time, but wishing that the people who worked here were having a bad time. Now that might make me sound like an absolutely hideous person. It probably does, but I don't care. The enjoyment that I was meant to be getting was based on my expectation of what Thailand was like, and it was nothing like, so let's leave it at that. When she got back, the first few days were bliss. She seemed to have got back to her old original self, the one that I first talked out about in the bar. I think she was trying to butter me up though, because after a few days she said she had something to tell me. She hoped I wouldn't be angry, but she really needed my help with something. She said her son was due to go back to school soon, and she didn't quite have enough money for all the stuff he needed, such as books and everything else that goes along with going back to school. It was only 25,000 baht, she said, and she really needed it. She wasn't working, therefore not making as much money as she used to, and 20,000 baht, while enough most of the time, wasn't enough this time, and the 25,000 baht was going to be needed. The thought of paying my money for someone else's child was worse than the thought of burning double the amount, but I decided to against my best judgment and hand over the cash, with the intention of seeing what would happen next. I reasoned with myself that if I could get a good couple of months out of her before her asking for more, it would still be far cheaper than going out every day, which I did when she wasn't there. But the nightmare had begun. I can't have been more than 2 weeks, and she said something happened back home, and her mother needed some money to pay off a loan that she got on some land. If she didn't pay it, then the land would be taken, and they wouldn't be able to grow rice on it anymore, because it would no longer belong to them. How much do you need? I asked. Only 80,000 baht, she said. We really need this, otherwise Mama will lose the land. 80,000 baht, I said. Are you joking? I knew full well she wasn't joking, but there was no way in holy hell I was going to give her this money. I'd given her 25,000 baht 2 weeks ago, thinking that this would last a number of months. But her asking again so soon was not right as far as I was concerned. How did she value herself at this amount of money, thinking what she used to do? And how many times? I'll leave it at that. I told her I wasn't going to be able to give her this money, as I didn't have it in Thailand at the time, but perhaps I could give it to her in about 4 weeks. I had no intention to give her the money, but I wanted to see what her reaction was. And, as expected, she wasn't happy with this. You no care about me, she said. No, I no care about your family, I said. I don't care about them at all. I don't want to give your family any money. I give you 20,000 baht a month, and if that's not enough, go F yourself. I think she was quite taken aback by this, and she settled down a bit and behaved herself for the next few days. She even overperformed more than normal. I must admit, I loved the way Ben used the word performed in his email. I had a good chuckle at that and have started using it myself. But yes, she was overperforming. A few days later, though, she was on the phone and in tears. Mama is going to lose her land, she said, while still on the phone. I just looked at her. I think she expected me to jump in and be the saviour, but no way in hell. I'm sorry, I said. Not my problem. Why don't you use the 20,000 baht I give you and pay it off in installments? She was very angry by this and hung up the phone. I knew there and then it was over. I couldn't get anything else of it without it costing me more money than it should, so I told her to leave. She begged me not to break up with her and said she was sorry, and I looked at her and said, "Can you promise me that you will never ask for any money other than the 20,000 baht I give you every month?" She looked at me, and I knew I was serious. She packed her bags and left. A few days later, I went back to the bar where she worked, and there she was again. What a despicable person, I thought. I have been happily single ever since. Granted, it costs me more money on a monthly basis with all the going on, but I don't have to deal with the baggage that comes along with being involved with one of these girls. It's not worth it. I find myself still living in Thailand. I suppose I'm one of the sorts that people lay into, the sort that complains about Thailand all the time while still living here. The thing is, I like the idea of Thailand. I like the thoughts of what goes along with it, and to a certain extent, what I can do here. I just wish that the people were more grateful with a lot less, and fun was cheaper. But it's not, and I put up with it. So, as Ben said, the land of greed. This is true, but it's also the land of opportunity and fun if you're prepared to put up with how greedy the people are. I'm half in and half out, and accepting it for what it is.